Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion on fat today, and in particular, we're going to look at saturated fat. Remember, saturated and trans fats, the ones that you see colored in red there, are those fats whenever you abuse them, get too much on a regular basis, will wreck your health. They'll promote chronic disease, in particular heart disease and strokes, where those fats over here on the right-hand side, the ones you see colored in green, are the heart healthy ones, or those that will promote optimal health and help you prevent getting a lot of the nasty chronic diseases that these fats will promote. So let's take a little bit of an in-depth look at saturated fats today, and I'll teach you what you need to know about them. So what are saturated fats? Well, saturated fats have a chemical makeup in which the carbon atoms are saturated with hydrogen atoms. It means there's no available bonds there for anything else to attach to that molecule. And you will typically find saturated fats solid at room temperature. So how do these saturated fats affect your health? And this is where you really need to understand this because, like I mentioned, when you respect this fat, it will prevent and steer you clear of a lot of nasty chronic diseases. But when you abuse this fat is when you'll run into things like high cholesterol, which will increase your risk for heart disease and strokes and things like that. So eating foods that contain saturated fats will once again raise your level of cholesterol in your blood. High levels of blood cholesterol will obviously increase your risk for heart diseases and strokes. And then you also need to be aware that eating too many animal foods, okay, animal foods is where you're going to find the majority of the saturated fat in your diet, are also going to be high in dietary cholesterol. These two together will likely increase your blood cholesterol levels even higher. All right, in some people, this effect is more prominent, and other people, the addition of additional dietary cholesterol doesn't show too much of a rise in comparison to the saturated fat. So really, you don't know how the two affect you personally. It is a good idea to have your lipid profile done, where you have your blood drawn and you get a report back from your physician saying, your cholesterol level's good, your HDL, LDL levels are high or low. So some people are going to be at higher risk when you eat too many saturated fats that come from animal sources because of the increased intake of dietary cholesterol as well. So that's very important to understand because there are two types of a cholesterol that are important. You have the good HDL cholesterol, and then you have what we typically consider the bad LDL cholesterol. Now, saturated fats, for the most part, are going to be LDL prominent. In other words, it affects your LDL more so than anything else. So we're going to not pay too much attention to HDL when we talk about saturated fat. So let's get rid of it. Now, when you eat too much saturated fat, it causes or can cause your LDL or bad cholesterol to go up. And that spells trouble because what happens is if this is your arterial wall and we're looking through an artery inside of your body, whenever you get too much LDL in your blood from eating too much saturated fat or dietary cholesterol, it causes plaque to build up in that arterial wall. And over time, it can totally block that wall or block that opening, which will result in a potential heart attack or stroke. So that's the danger in eating too much of this fat, is that it can cause a big-time buildup called atherosclerosis in your arterial walls, which leads to very bad things for your health. So let's look at where we find these saturated fats. You're going to find them mainly in animals, such as beef, lamb, pork, poultry with the skin, beef fat, lard, cream butter, cheese, whole or reduced fat dairy products. Okay, those are going to be your primary culprits. And then you're going to also find them in some plants, such as palm kernel, and coconut oils. And that's what you have to be aware about. A lot of those bars on the shelves, those meal replacement bars and other supplements, they look like they're healthy, but if you really delved into the ingredients list, you'll find that the majority of them use these high saturated fat oils, which obviously can cause you to consume too much saturated fat, which can wreck your cholesterol levels. And then the big culprit of all these is whenever you get them from the baked and fried goods, such as your cakes, cookies, pastries, and pies. And these foods right here, guys, are the big time culprits of heart diseases and strokes and things like that. Okay, there's much more evidence that suggests that it's whenever you get your saturated fats from these foods is whenever you're at the highest risk of developing, heart diseases and things like that. So what's the effect of all this stuff? Well, as we just mentioned, getting too much saturated fats raises your bad LDL cholesterol, which will increase your risk for heart disease. And your daily limit of this fat should be less than 7% of your upper total daily calorie goal. So what does that mean? Well, again, try to limit yourself to less than 7% of your total caloric needs. So what's cool about your journaling is that your saturated fat is going to be calculated for you. So the first thing you need to be aware about is your upper calorie budget number, which in this example was 1,600. And what the journal automatically does is it calculates what 7% of that is, and that goal right there that you see, less than 12 grams, would be this person's goal for consuming saturated fat per day. When you can consistently keep yourself under that limit or that goal that you see on your nutrition logs is when you're going to see the biggest changes happening from within your cholesterol levels. So those of you who are doing a good job keeping yourself less than that limit are going to see a nice change whenever you go back to the doctor and you have your total cholesterol read, your LDL levels read. You're going to see a big improvement with those if you're consistently keeping yourself under that limit. If you're consistently going over that limit is whenever you could potentially see an increased rise in your total cholesterol levels, and then is when you're going to also see a big time rise in your LDL cholesterol levels. And then keep in mind too that the dietary cholesterol will go hand in hand in this. So those of you who are consistently going over your limit with saturated fat and dietary cholesterol levels are doing nothing but setting yourself up for some potential chronic diseases. And for those of you doing the opposite, keeping yourself under 300 milligrams, which is the same for everybody, and then keeping yourself under less than 7% of your caloric needs for saturated fat are going to see the biggest changes in your cholesterol levels the next time your doctor checks those. So it's very important to know, and it's very important to pay attention to those things on a regular basis from within your nutrition logs. So how do you know how much saturated fat is in a product? All food labels, guys, are going to list the amount of saturated fat a food product contains per labeled serving. But also, I always like to mention this, you always remember to begin your assessment of a food label by first looking at the serving size, the number of servings, and then the calorie content. And then your eyes can scan the ingredients list and other parts of the food label. But always look at those serving size and calories first. So last time that we talked about fat in general, we brought up some examples. In particular, we brought up whole milk, 2% milk, and skim milk. We're going to look at that again today because what I want to point out today is the saturated fat in these. So if you look at whole milk, there's saturated fat, which will always be located directly under the total fat. You can see there's 5 grams of saturated fat in just 1 cup of whole milk, which is why it's best to reduce or limit how much that you get from whole milk products. And it's an even better idea to go ahead and downscale the kind of milk that you consume. There you can see that 2% milk has just 3 grams of saturated fat, and skim milk, better yet, has 0 grams of saturated fat. So for those of you who are in this program to decrease your cholesterol levels and, not have the same thing happen that's happened to a lot of your close family members, then you should try to keep yourself as closely as possible or with the best effort that you can under 7% of your total calories from saturated fat. So what can you use to replace saturated fats in the foods that I eat? So I'm going to give you a couple examples here, and if you want to, you can go ahead and pause this video and scan through this yourself. I'm not going to go step by step through this, but these are great alternatives in your recipes and things like that you can substitute out to reduce the amount of fat, and in particular saturated fat, in your daily diet. So take a look at that, pause the video like I said, and go through that if you'd like. And then to wrap this whole thing up, once again, these fats on the left-hand side in red are going to wreck your health. The ones on the right will promote health. That's what you need to know about saturated fats today. The next lesson, we're going to talk about trans, which we already kind of delved into a little bit, but we'll reiterate a lot of what we talked about and then finish up on this left-hand side of this chart. And then we'll begin to talk about all these good fats and some really cool things to know about them. So I'll see you guys again next time. Bye-bye.